This is a message for Peter. You asked me to give you a call and tell you a little bit about the skateboarding project we've been doing in Milton Keynes. The problem they've had is that after 20 years of continuous use, the skaters have caused damage and they've frankly pissed off thousands of office workers.
You can't really see our point of view.
I'm trying to make a film! It'll kill me if you put that on there.
People have been talking about banning skating, all sorts, but we thought there has to be a better solution than that. So the council set up this Skate MK consultation project to find out what's really going on, and they were pretty surprised at what they found out.
My first memories are of just this mecca. Milton Keynes, for some reason, we already knew, because we just knew it was a new city. There must be so many, unexplored skate spots, and we just went from spot to spot to spot, going, oh my god, look at this, and feeling so excited, already planning the next time we were going to come back.
I never realised it was as widely recognised as it is, in terms of some of the features that are skated here and some of the top pro skaters who come here to be photographed skating. I think the thing that's interesting is also that there is such a heritage behind it. There's 25 years of skating here, and there is such a large skate community.
We've learnt that this is an incredibly skillful thing and something which should be encouraged. We've also learned that skaters are incredibly creative people.
Make your own stuff up, you can use your own mind, you can be creative if you're riding, you're not just following a routine, there's a quarter pipe rider, you're doing your own thing, and it's an expression of, I guess, every single rider. So it's just finding lines that weren't built for anything in particular, they were just built because that's the way they were built.
Milton Keynes city centre started taking shape just as the mid-80s skating craze got going, and inevitably skaters started to come out of the suburbs and ride the shopping centre and the office buildings in the city centre. As the early 90s came around, street skating became the in thing for skaters to do. Milton Keynes quickly got a reputation for being one of the best places in the country. It's kind of like this American-style Marvel city. The funny thing is that even as the numbers of skaters coming increased, initially at least, nobody seemed to mind. You could go out, you could skate anywhere, at any time. We didn't think it would ever end. But by 2001, things were different. Another boom in the late 90s meant that the numbers of people skating the city every week were still on the up, and as the numbers of skaters increased, it reached a tipping point where more and more people were being affected and started to get upset.
Probably the biggest problem to the centre and impacts upon people's experiences within the shopping centre.
The police came up with a leaflet they were handing around basically saying you can be arrested for criminal damage. Quite frankly, they're not necessarily breaking the law.
If you want to understand what's gone wrong in Milton Keynes with skateboarding, then a good place to start is the Beige, which is that office building in the centre of town. The landlords have tried to stop skating by putting in obstacles and barriers. It started about 10 years ago. They put a rumble strip thing at the bottom of the 3 steps there, but of course it immediately made their problem worse because people started coming from all over just to skate the new challenge. They did the same thing with the 6 steps there, but I think what they didn't really understand was that these were like a national treasure for skaters during the 90s. They were famous, so when they put a barrier at the top to stop people skating, it was actually exactly what they didn't want to do. People started coming just to skate the new barriers.
The Beige is an example of incorrect detailing, because all they've done is they've actually enhanced the problem they were trying to alleviate in the first place. But if you don't have a proper appreciation of how people interpret their environment, then you're not likely to be able to actually solve the issues that you may be suffering in the first place.
Yes, you can put in certain physical features into a car park or onto a certain walkway, but all you've done then is create a confrontational designing out process. You haven't actually managed the problem at all.
I don't necessarily think that conflict areas are problems. A successful city has to have a bit of excitement, it has to have a bit of edge. So if someone comes to visit the city or lives in the city or works in the city, they don't just get a bland custard of activity. They're going to get certain things that are occasionally in opposition to each other, and that's okay. And I would want to encourage that and find ways of coexisting, not ways of removing the conflict.
Street sports are interpretive. Street sports are about how people adapt their environment and how they can use it for their sport and their the thing that they actually believe in. So very often the process that many local authorities go through ends up being a failure because they don't consult properly and they don't get the kids on board, they don't get skaters on board.
The council organised a really rigorous public consultation that involved recruiting people from all sides of the issue to build a consensus on how to tackle the problems, and they did this through a programme of quite imaginative consultation events.
You're educating both sides. If you're talking to both sides about what the benefits and disbenefits of the activity are, then you're helping people understand the other's point of view. And that's a target for us really, is to make everyone understand the other's point of view, to interject a sense of social responsibility in what people are doing. I suppose the problems could really be summarised in three ways. There is an issue of damage to an infrastructure which was never designed to take street sports. There are certainly issues of noise, and that seems to be quite a key one really, that people don't necessarily mind skateboarders and BMXers being around, but they do object to the noise which is created. And the third one is largely perception problems, because people do worry about skaters and so on mowing down pedestrians and that kind of thing. And largely speaking, this doesn't happen in reality, but there is a real issue there with people thinking that it's going to happen and being frightened to actually go in areas where people are skating.
People have been surprised and rather irritated because it doesn't fit in with the expectations they've got of a well-managed and polite city centre.
There are a number of issues in relation to where street sports should be and where pedestrians should be, and about feeling of public safety.
You can't eradicate the problem, but you need to be able to manage the problem and to supply the people who want to engage in that sport the facility, at the same time reducing the impact they're having in the community as a whole.
On the other side of things, through the youth events and the consultation, skaters were bringing all these quite unexpected ideas into the process. I think it is fair to say that they totally flipped the architects and the town planners out.
You're making a video of me texting someone.
Most people just assumed that we'd end up building a skate park, the sort of traditional style of things, bowls and ramps and things like that. The problem is that this assumes that skaters naturally prefer to ride this kind of place, and that they only skate the streets as a kind of poor substitute. But the more we stopped and looked at that as an assumption, the more we realised that this kind of thinking is actually left over from the 70s and 80s. It doesn't really take into account the culture of street sports that's come through in the last 10 years or so.
We thought that it was to do with bowls and wonderful shapes and this kind of thing. And we realise now that that fulfills a certain requirement of some skaters, and is definitely something which should be aspired to eventually. But really the issues to do with the here and now are to do with the issues of the street.
They'd think, oh, well, a skate park, people skate in it, but there is a difference between skating something on a street terrain that's not purposely designed to do that. It's a bit more of an achievement really.
It comes back to the kind of the anti-establishment sort of resistance. They're using the architecture in a way that it isn't designed to be used. I think that's why they reject these purpose-built skate spots. There's something quite sterile, and I think it's just controlled, a bit too controlled.
We're starting to realise that the problem that we've got is actually a little bit trickier than we first thought. We've got skaters coming all the way from other towns, places with skate parks in them, all the way to Milton Keynes just to skate the street here. So the question was, how do we create a substitute for that? If we want to move people away from problem areas, how do you create something better than the street?
Well, part of the process is to actually give street sports enthusiasts places that they want to skate, that they will skate, that are recreated elements of the street, that are preferable.
The idea of routes and honeypots is one that we're looking at, where we actually create spaces around the city which are better to skate than in other areas. So there's an attraction, smoother surfaces, shorter blocks.
We're talking a few areas of everyday street that have been designed with skating in mind, basically, you know, using the insights that we've gained during the consultation process.
We will give them an alternative to skating some of the places that they're already skating around here.
Not banning skaters, but actually saying what is the real issue here and dealing with the real issue.
We've actually built up, you know, quite a detailed picture of what would work and what wouldn't, you know, if we're actually going to build areas of skatable street that are preferable to skaters and would last. As an example, we've been looking at the long granite block at the bus station, which is probably one of the most skated things in the whole city. It's been skated over for, you know, well over 15 years, and it's still in pretty good nick. And we've realised that its strength, its longevity, is due to, you know, this combination of materials, design, but also this tiny detail, a small radius along its edge. If our plan was going to work, then learning and incorporating these kinds of little insights into the design and the build of our honeypots is really going to be the difference between success and failure.
All right, so who's going to speak? Gav, what have we done tonight? Tell us.
Okay, so we just came out of a Skate MK meeting, and they basically announced that the landlord of the bus station is going to let us build our first honeypot there, which is going to be just amazing. Basically, everybody's really, really pleased.
Since it opened in the mid-80s, Milton Keynes bus station's been a sort of unofficial base for skaters in Milton Keynes. It's borne witness to generations of skaters that have come here, you know, as a place to meet up and skate basically out of the rain. So not surprisingly, over the years, its popularity sparked a sort of similar battle between skaters and landlords as we've seen up and down the city in places like the Beige. But through the 90s, through the early noughties, the place has become more popular now, you know, than ever. English Partnerships own the building, and they had been part of the public consultation project around skating. And so thankfully they've been persuaded to allow the building to become the first honeypot. The design of the site is being led by a local pro skater, Rob Selly, who's working closely with the senior landscape architect, Richard Ferrington, MK Council. And between them, they've come up with, you know, a real street plaza called the Buzzy.
It's not something that's taught in schools of architecture and landscape architecture.
The new Buzzy has a large 2-level granite block. It has a painted concrete centrepiece manual block, which is edged with steel, and it has a long freestanding single block, which is identical in design to a number of others up and down the city. The materials used were selected to fit in with what was already there to give the site as natural a look as possible. With some additional landscaping, they've also put in a long set of 5 steps which have got blocks running on either side that are slightly slanted. One of them is finished in granite and the other one in concrete with steel edging. A good sized set of steps is something that the bus station has never had before, so it's actually really exciting and brings a real different dimension to the place. And Rob also designed a Pier 7 style manual block, which is based on a really famous skate spot in San Francisco and provides just something a little bit different that you don't see anywhere else in Milton Keynes. That's been integrated into the existing infrastructure, has a little curved radius block on it as well, and there's also a flat bar which is exactly the same as lots of others that you see across the city, and that just provides something that is quintessentially, I think, Milton Keynes. And as I said before, it's the small details that really count. For example, all the granite surfaces have been finished with this 10mm radius. The concrete blocks have also been given these subtle steel inserts to strengthen them. But I think the thing that makes everything really work is actually the way that Rob sort of designed the layout. So skaters can creatively link strings of tricks together, that they can use their imagination to think up new ways to ride the block. You know, it's really not prescriptive at all. A guess the point that I think people should take away from our experience is that there isn't really a set way of dealing with problems like skateboarding. We're certainly not saying that we think that everybody else should go out and build what we've built. What I would say though is that any council needs to think really carefully before they actually go out and build, something. Consult well, consider carefully.
We want to make sure the way we design the city and the spaces within the city not only encourage and stimulate and excite and innovate around how people use the spaces, but allow folk to use the spaces in ways that aren't going to tread on other people's toes or collide with other people's interests.
We've definitely seen a decline in skateboarding, abuse if that's the right word, around, and I think that's certainly since the Skate MK process has started.
We had some people come over who built the kind of more traditional style skate parks. They were from Germany, I think, and they looked at the Buzzy design and they were like, we don't get it, that's not a skate park. And I think that's when I knew that we got it right.